This week's reading is from Rays of the One Light, weekly commentaries on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's reading is, Who are true Christians? Truth is one and eternal. Recognize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. Jesus Christ said in chapter 10 of the Gospel of St. John, "All that ever came before me were thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them." Many Christians, not surprisingly, quote this saying in condemnation of other spiritual teachers, not only the Old Testament prophets, but also Buddha, Krishna, and others who lived before Jesus, as well as, by inference, any who came after him. Yet Jesus himself said in St. Matthew chapter 5, "Think not that I am come to destroy the law or the prophets. I am come not to destroy, but to fulfill." Nowhere do we find Jesus condemning or even gently criticizing other spiritual masters. His criticisms were reserved for worldly attitudes and for those hypocritical Pharisees who had allowed religion to become, for them, a pretense. Paramahansa Yogananda explained that the expression, "all that ever came before me," referred to those spiritual teachers who placed their egos and their self-importance ahead of the Christ consciousness, in the sense of drawing people's devotion to themselves and not offering it to where it alone truly belongs, to God. Yogananda himself was very firm in this regard. For example, he never spoke of anyone as his disciple. Instead, he always insisted, they're God's disciples. God is the guru, not I. Ego is a way station on the soul's journey towards enlightenment. The soul is first trapped in lower bodily forms. Slowly it evolves to the human level, at which point self-consciousness appears. Only in human form can self-consciousness transcend material form altogether, including the lower identity of ego consciousness, and discover the true divine self within. Self-consciousness manifested as ego is an incentive to deliberate self-development. Later in this process of development, however, the ego becomes an obstruction. Inevitably, new spiritual aspirants do not emerge effortlessly from the vortex of ego consciousness. Desire must be offered up resolutely and ever more wholeheartedly on the altar of infinity. It is a gradual process, and few even among those who seek to help others are free of ego. If, however, their motive in teaching is not to serve, but to be served, they deserve a severe reprimand, as Jesus gave them. For their direction of development is no longer upward, but downward. In the name of giving up desires, they are creating new ones. As it says in the Bhagavad Gita in the 3rd chapter, "Desire obscures even the wisdom of the wise. Their relentless foe it is, a flame never quenched." Intellect, mind, and senses, these combined are referred to as the seat of desire. Desire through them deludes and eclipses the discrimination of the embodied soul. O Arjuna, discipline your senses, and having done so, work to destroy desire, annihilator of wisdom and of self-realization. Give God the credit for everything you do. See him as the true doer. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Good morning, I'm Nayaswami, Hriman, and my wife Padma. Yesterday, as we do when we're contemplating giving a talk at Sunday service, take the day of Saturday It's a quiet day, a day of seclusion. So there I was, minding my own business, as we say, meditating, winds howling all about, and suddenly the 3-story building that our apartment's in just sort of shuddered, just went like this. Now, I've been in many earthquakes, and I knew it wasn't an earthquake. But I thought, boy, I've never had a wind shake a building of that size like that. That's really unusual. Well, I went on meditating. Finally, Padma comes to the door, a room I was meditating, bang on the door, and, oh, what do you want, you know? Go outside, well, this big old tree right outside of our apartment just went, laid itself down, nice and sweet, real soft like. You just put it down and didn't wipe out my car or anybody else's car. Barely, I mean, it just, even the beautiful garden right below was not too badly damaged. Well, old chainsaw Om Prakash was out there. He's known for his skills with the chainsaw. Before I could get out there, he was out there cutting it up, and different people in the community there, at our community in Linwood, gathered, and we dragged pieces of it out of there. So it's a different Saturday than normal, but it's like we had a November storm come a bit early. And it reminded me, because just a few days ago was the anniversary, 10-year anniversary of the Katrina storm. And like 9/11, it's something I've said from time to time, and I'm not alone, that Katrina will mark will be a historical turning point in our awareness that we need to take care of ourselves. And our community, we have 9 communities around the world, are based in that of cooperation, working together, and trying to develop lifestyles of sustainable meditation and service to others, and sustainability in both economic and ecological ways. And so I thought, okay, this is a little test, isn't it? Because the day certainly will come when more of that will be needed. We need lots more of that on this planet, lots more, great many people who take responsibility for themselves, not as cowboys and according to the ridiculous American myth, but in cooperation with other people, for which in fact Americans are quite good, renowned throughout the world for our ability to work together when we need to. And this is very much what we're talking about today. Who are true Christians? I don't know why our teacher, founder Swami Kriyananda, used that for a title, because it's a little bit misleading. We're not all that interested in who are true Christians, at least not from the standpoint of true Christians, Orthodox, that is. What he's really saying is, what does it mean to be spiritual? And the way I'd like to twist that today is along that phrase, spiritual but not religious. Commonly heard, the Northwest, in fact, of all the regions of our country, is the most notable for a number of people who don't have any traditional religious affiliations. And so it's an important question, actually, because are we throwing the baby out with the bathwater? There is a story, somebody, one of Yogananda's followers, disciples, whatever, said to him, "Sir, will I ever leave the spiritual path?" Yogananda looked at him and said, "How could you? We are all on the spiritual path." And isn't it so that even a self-proclaimed atheist, if he's caring and loving and serviceful and so forth, virtuous in general, isn't that a lot better than many so-called churchgoers who perhaps are a bit judgmental or worse? And so, yes, we're all spiritual in one sense or another, at least people of intelligent goodwill, regardless of our beliefs. So fine. How could we not be on the spiritual path? According to the precepts of Sanatana Dharma, of metaphysics and so forth, this entire cosmos, this entire universe, you and I each, are manifestations of the one reality there is, which is spirit, which is God. So how can we leave the spiritual path? Okay, we can't, kind of. Because the other side of it, and the mantra that we've been taught in assessing the world and reality around us that has served my life and that of others so well throughout this decades is the mantra both and. Reality is infinite. Reality is everything. Reality is both and. Because as true as it might be to say that all of us are children of God, souls, a reflection of the Spirit, on the other hand, Jesus said, I bring not peace, I bring a sword. And the great Hindu Bible, the Bhagavad Gita that we read from every Sunday and so forth, takes place on a battlefield. And there's the great disciple Arjuna, there in the chariot with Krishna, surveying the battle lines between his cousins, the now self-proclaimed enemies, and his own family and kinsmen, the rightful heirs to the kingdom. This was an actual battle, a historical battle made into a scripture, an allegory in the great epic, the world's longest epic, the Mahabharata. And so there they are surveying, and Arjuna says, well, these are all my kith and kinsmen. Why should I fight them? I've grown up with them. Why should I kill them? And Krishna, his driver, his charioteer, says, you are a warrior. It is your duty to fight. No one dies in these battles. The soul is eternal and changeless. Get up and fight and be victorious. And so it is we find, and the world around us in fact imposes upon us the need to struggle, to take care of ourselves, to learn the right ways of diet and health, of relationships, of how to show up on time at work and do our job and do it well, etc., etc. Disease, illness, war, we have to struggle to even survive. This is the great lesson of life. We were sitting at dinner in the community the other night, a few of us here, and I forget how it all went, but somebody remarked, we were talking about movies. Anybody know any good movies? Well, there's not many good movies, right? And then we talked about some war movie, and I don't know if it was Susan here or somebody said, we're still fighting World War II? Well, we're still fighting the Civil War and every other war on this planet, depending where you live on the planet. War captures, war and peace, love and war capture the human imagination because both are at the very fundamental roots of our psyche and of the mission we've been given, the adventure and self-realization, which is the journey of our soul through countless incarnations. Yes, war and peace. We come to meditation, people come to religion generally, but people come to meditation and yoga specifically to be peaceful. And then, to their dismay, sometimes they discover it's a battle, it's a war. It takes effort to hold those poses, doesn't it? And yet the effort can't be simply brute force. We have to relax, even into a yoga pose. To meditate deeply, we have to relax the mind in order to transcend the mind. And so it takes effort, you see. And so there is also a point, therefore, when the soul, sort of contemplating, as it says in Yogananda's famous life story autobiography of a yogi, when the soul contemplating the anguishing monotony of repeated rounds of birth says, I want out. Not in rejection of the world, but I want to be free from that which is a delusion in this world. And that delusion is that we can find happiness through the senses, through the physical plane. You know, in the great teachings of India down through the ages, one of the consistent themes of introspection offered to the aspiring devotee is the theme of examining, through introspection, examining the state of our dreams, in which and Yogananda extended that to the 20th century to that of the movie. Because whether in a dream or a movie, they're both false. And yet we cry and we laugh, or sometimes I wake up, Padma tells me in the middle of the night screaming, some monster is chasing me down the street or something. I don't really remember, but it seems to be what's going on. And so we get totally wrapped up in these movies and the movie of the dream. And the yogis have said since ancient times, step back. Which, therefore, is the dream? Your waking state? And in Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, and as those of us who go more deeply and deeply into the spiritual path, we realize, and even science tells us, that our most desirable sense impressions and so forth are all in our head. What I like, you dislike. Put it in one context, it's pleasure. Put it in another context, it's violence. None of those things, that's all a dream in the sense that it's mental imagery. The essence of yoga, Patanjali's second most famous, his most famous stanza, the second stanza, Yogas Chitta Vritti Nirod, is the calming, the pacifying, the relaxing of the mental activity whereby we react to our perceptions. It's all perception. It doesn't mean it isn't real on its own level. But basically, our relationship to it, its meaning to us, has to do with our response to it. And so, to be truly a Christian, to be truly a devotee, takes a conscious act of will. I was just rereading the Holy Science, Sri Yukteswar's only book, the only book I don't recommend to anybody, because it's too weird. It's too abstruse. Even Yogananda confessed he didn't really understand it. Sri Yukteswar was commissioned by Babaji there to write a book showing the underlying oneness of the teachings of Christianity and that of Sanatana Dharma, the ancient precepts of India. I don't know that he really did that, but it's an interesting book anyway. But right at the end of it, we make light of the fact that after all this abstruse mentality, he says, I hope I have shown that without love, one cannot take one step on the spiritual path. Well, he did anything but that, but he made his point anyway, notwithstanding, because it's true. You know, when Jesus was asked to summarize his teachings, he quoted the Old Testament. He said, love God with all thy heart and love thy neighbor as thyself. When Yogananda came here, what he chose for his work, the name of his organization, which was a bit of a flop, he had to change it, but he called it Yogoda Satsanga, that which imparts yoga through fellowship, and then he changed it to Self-Realization Fellowship. But those twin principles, the soul seeking union with God, seeking to realize the self, to know the self, in communion and in cooperation with the fellowship of souls. And we who are attracted to meditation tend to have something of what we call hermit samskars, a tendency to want to be apart, perhaps. We need, and especially in this age, which is so needful of the inner path to balance our restless outwardness, we need to do so with others. And so, recently at Ananda Village, where Ananda started many, many decades ago, we came together, the core of people, 300 or 400 people in the Sevaka religious order. Those people, some of us here, about 20 or so, live in the Ananda community locally, who have given our lives to the service of Yogananda through the work of Ananda specifically. We need in this world, and that's just one example, without that order and without what that order represents, the commitment to practical service through an array of spiritual power that is relevant to the world, needed by the world, yoga and meditation today. Without that commitment, well, let's just say this is what's needed spiritually. This is what's being offered. And all these many decades, Ananda has mostly been guided by, and the public's eye had been focused upon our founder, Swami Kriyananda, but he's gone. He left his body in 2013. And so the Ananda work worldwide, when we gathered for our annual conference, Spiritual Renewal Week in August, we came to the realization that we need to emphasize, we need new symbols of renunciation in the modern age. Not renunciation and we're going around in rags with begging bowls. That doesn't inspire anybody. But renunciation in the sense of families and householders, people with children, single people, people of all walks of life. Partly that's why we have communities, residential communities. But anybody can be inspired and apply as best they can to their lives according to the karma and dharma that we have in our lives. We need examples of self-giving, yajna. This is the great theme, the other great theme of the Bhagavad Gita and on down through the ages, all spiritual traditions. It's the symbol of being on a cross. It's the symbol of Isaac Abraham sacrificing, being willing to sacrifice Isaac. It is the giving of the self to the greater self. We need symbols of that, especially in the culture of materialism and consumerism. And so we have that. And then as sort of a reflection of that, but without any regard to any organization, anything material whatsoever, Swami Kriyananda in 2009, near the end of his life, was inspired as a Swami in the Giri branch of the ancient Swami orders. He felt empowered to create a new Swami order. The Naya means new. Nayaswami order. It's open to people of all faiths and traditions. It has nothing to do organizationally with Ananda. There are several levels. The intention of the pilgrim, and then married couples can be what's known as a tyagi, and singles a brahmachari, and finally the final vows of sannyas, of renunciation, as Swami, whether married or single. In this order, throughout the world, there are people from all different faiths, though given its newness in the world is mostly, obviously, still Ananda. Those of us who wear the blue, for example, are Swamis, Nayaswamis. And so we need these symbols. Just as we found here at Ananda, when we had the great gift of being able to create this lovely meditation hall, this temple, suddenly we found that people came from all over the region, not just to see it, but were inspired by it. Whereas when we had a little funky rented storefront down in the Roosevelt district all those years, you had to be dyed in the wool, so to speak. You had to already know what you wanted to walk through those doors, because there was nothing inviting about them at all. And thus it is. We are symbols. Our bodies are symbols. The way we speak, our virtue or lack of virtue, is all of that. And so what it means to be a true Christian, what it means to be a true disciple of life, of God, to be a true devotee, requires a conscious act. It requires self-sacrifice. That's the ego's term for it. We will say in a few minutes in our Festival of Light ceremony that concludes the Sunday service, and written by Kriyananda many decades ago, inspired in a seclusion in Assisi, Italy. It says, "And whereas in the past the coin of man's redemption was sorrow and suffering, for us now the payment has been exchanged for calm acceptance and joy." That which inspires us in this new age of spiritual awakening is joy, and joy is our true nature. It may have been, and certainly was, that whether in the East or the West, suffering was the payment. Suffering was the gateway. Renunciation and rejection of the world was the way. But that way has now been replaced by a new dispensation that Yogananda, through the light of yoga on the planet and others, is offering the planet the way of joy. The understanding, the perception that God is joy, that a life of attunement, of divine attunement, brings to us satisfaction, whereas a life of ego affirmation can only bring us pain. We need people to come forth and commit themselves in fellowship and in inner communion, meaning meditation, to be way-showers, to be light-bearers of what is a new form of spirituality. It isn't restricted to any one particular expression of it, neither Ananda or Yogananda, naturally, but we are doing that. And for those in tune with it, we offer those ways doing that. And we have, I mentioned the Sevaka order, but we have locally, for those who have their families and careers and so forth, we have our lay order, as it's called, the sadhaka order, in which no matter what else your responsibilities you have, if your life of faith and meditation and spiritual service is focused on and through Ananda, we come together as sadhakas, those who are sadhaks, those who practice sadhana, meditation, and service. And so we have these forms. We need new forms. We can't just throw the whole thing out. So many people, spiritual but not religious, think, well, you know, I help little old ladies across the street, or I donate to this or that relief fund, and so I'm spiritual. I'm just spiritual as you. Well, okay, I'm not going to argue that. But let's walk the talk and give ourselves to the greater glory, which is the Spirit within us and within all people. And this is what's needed in our world today. I don't know how anybody can be self-satisfied with their material prosperity or their very fulfilling occupations when they contemplate the life that billions of people lead, which is anything but that. We didn't come here to live for ourselves. We came here to give of ourselves to the only truth there is, the truth that shall make us free. And that's not an obligation, that's a privilege.
I'd like to read to you Yogananda's words in Whispers from Eternity that Hriman selected. Endless thrills of delight. I attuned my life with thine. Now my life has become a long, unbroken inspiration. Thy fountain of bliss refreshes and delights me day and night. Whether I be wakeful, fast asleep, or dreaming fondly of thee. Oh, what has become of me? Delight on overwhelming delight. Endless, indescribable thrills of divine delight spray unceasingly over me. O aged nectar, wine of centuries, I found thee at last and will taste of thy sweetness forever, forever, forever. Oh.